Flipside by Bedhead. Chapter 11. As some pony had told Spike that morning, he'd be running full tilt toward the most feared place in Equestria. He had laughed non-stop for days. As his lungs burned in his chest, his mind was trying to process why he was doing just that. Tinejar and Charlie were just a little ahead of him. Thunderlane and dzetaW flew overhead, wings pounding to keep up, while Twilight clung to his mane in a desperate bid to avoid being flung from his back. None of them seemed to provide any answers. Somehow, he found himself caught up in the moment. Now he was chasing after a crazy stallion, and as he thought entering the ever-free forest was a good idea. Even in the dead of night, he could make out the thick trees up ahead. Though it hardly mattered. Spike realized he was on the same path he followed to Flipside earlier that day. "Big Mac!" Charlie suddenly shouted, somehow pushing her host faster. "Wait!" Spike's eyes managed to focus past his exhaustion. The giant red earth pony was standing at the forest's edge. He turned at Charlie's shout and gave a solemn nod to the 5 ponies as they ran up. Finally stumbling to a halt, Spike gulped down as much air as he could, just as the urge to keel over on the spot. "Everypony?" Big Mac greeted them simply, with a slow nod. "Now, Big Mac, I'm hoping I misheard you at the hospital." Time Turner fretted, taking a few measured steps forward. "I would have sworn that you said you were going to the Everfree." "That's 'cause I did," Big Mac confirmed with another nod. "There's a chance I'll help out with them in there. I'm gonna take it." I'm the only one that thinks it's nuts," Spike coughed out, before taking another ragged guess. "I wouldn't have put this so bluntly, but Spike, Mr. Prose." Time Turner trailed off and looked to a unicorn. Spike simply waved a hoof towards the scheduler, urging him to continue. With everything else happening, he found himself unsure to care which name he used. "Spike has a point," Time Turner summed up. "The Everfree Force is incredibly dangerous." "Yeah!" Thunderlane agreed from overhead, bobbing slightly as he hovered in place. "You can't just go running in on your own." "Thank you," Time Turner said with a grin. "Exactly my point." "So I'm going with you," Thunderlane stated, standing in front of the red stallion. "What?" Spike, Time Turner, Twilight, and Charlie all shouted at once. "Me too!" Ditsy cheered, almost face-planting as he landed. Big Mac just smiled to the 2 Pegasus ponies and gave them a nod. Spike's eye twitched involuntarily as he rubbed his forehead. Suddenly, it seemed so clear to him that these 3 ponies were crazy. Based off Charlie's slack jaw and Time Turner's stunned expression, it was clear he wasn't the only one that thought so. "Please tell me you 3 aren't serious," Twilight pleaded from Spike's back. "I mean, it's the Everfree Forest! I don't think any pony is even sure what's in there." "That's the only chance thinking might have," Ditsy muttered, both her eyes looking away, though in different directions. "Let's not be hasty," Time Turner said, beckoning to the trio with his hoof. "I sent Rainbow Dash to Canterlot, remember? It's only a matter of hours before the Royal Guard is here, and—" "What if we don't have hours?" Thunderlane cut off, his waist giving an impatient flap. "How long do you think Nightmare Moon is just gonna let the elements sit around? She could be heading for them right now!" "Unless they go for him." Big Mac's voice felt heavy, as the implication hung in the air. Every pony was silent for a moment, before Charlie moved to the other 3. She gave Time Turner and Spike a sad little smile, before taking a stand next to Ditsy. "Charlie?" Spike gasped out, eyes going wide. "Not you too!" "Most of the cursed foals are my students," Charlie answered. "I just can't abandon them." Spike looked to the other sane stallion of the group. Time Turner was biting down on his lip as he looked down at the other 4. "I can't believe you're all going through with this," he said, shaking his head. "Spike's right. It's sheer insanity. Have you even thought—" "Hey, nobody's making you guys come along!" Thunderlane interrupted, as his wings flared defensively. Time Turner fell silent, his mouth snapping shut like a mousetrap. Spike cringed as the Pegasus stallion's glare fell across him as well. "If you're not going to help, then go back to the hospital or something!" Thunderlane carried on, folding his wings back as he turned toward the forest. "The rest of us don't have time to waste." Charlie reached a hoof toward the weather pony, only for him to dash off. Before any pony could blink, his dark coat was blending into the shadows of the trees. "Thunderlane!" Charlie shouted, chasing after him. Big Mac hurried as well, crossing the threshold of trees along with Shirley. Dizzy gave Spike and Time Turner one last sad look before running after them. Spike remained in stunned silence for a second before looking to Time Turner. The tan stallion's head lowered to his chest as he sat in place, unmoving. Twilight slid from her friend's back, pawing over to the Skelter and patting him to the side. I guess we should head back then? Spike asked, not sure what else to say. I mean, the Royal Guard will want to hear about what's happened. No, Time Turner said, releasing a heavy sigh as he stood up. Excuse me? Twilight asked, taking a step back. A good conscience. I can't let 4 Ponyville citizens run around Everfree, Time Turner explained, stamping his hoof. At least, not without a guide. By Flipside, I probably know the most about that forest. What? Spike asked, before nosing the apologetic smile the other stallions wore. But how would... I accompanied a Canterlot survey team last month for some town business, Time Turner explained, before giving them both a quick nod. No time for details, though. When I come back, I'll tell you the whole story. Spike tried to protest, but the Earth Pony had already taken off. A small dust cloud was the only sign of leaving. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, staring at Time Turner had been. For several minutes, or possibly only a few seconds, there was only silence. Then Twilight turned to him, with worry growing in her purple eyes. So, she managed to whimper out, what are we going to do? The unicorn looked from his friend to the forest trail, unsure how to answer. He could feel the urge to turn and run, filling his limbs. Spike could remember the town well enough. The train station wasn't too far, and he wouldn't even need to pass the hospital. But something kept him anchored in place. The looks on the faces of the 5 ponies running into untold danger. The only 5 ponies who had been willing to listen to him. You're going after them, aren't you? Twilight guessed. Spike looked to the baby dragon. Her claws twisted together in worry. He tried to give her a smile, running a gentle hoof over her head spines. The stallion just nodded as she looked up to him. I'm going with you! Twilight insisted. Twi? Spike began to protest. We're partners, aren't we? Twilight continued, causing Spike's mouth to shut. If something happened to you, I'd be... She trailed off and wiped at her eyes. Spike looked back to the dark forest and tried very hard to not think about what Twilight was getting at. It's gonna be dangerous, Spike pointed out, his nose trembling. Are you sure you don't want to wait at the library? The familiar feeling of claws on his back was the answer. Twilight wrapped her little arms around him and smiled. Spike just let out a sigh, half frustration and half relief. You're staying close then, alright? He said, starting for the trees. Something howled in the distance, causing Twilight's grip to tighten. The moon overhead was soon obscured by the branches of trees. No arguments here, she promised as Spike's horn lit up like a green lamp. Nightmare Moon scowled as silver light faded from her eyes. The canopy of Everfree Forest blocked Moon's light, and consequently her view of what was happening. Well, she mused, her tone flat and threatening. It would see some remember the story better than others. Something registered at the back of her mind. A gasp of realization. The dark alicorn smiled inwardly as her body dissolved into black mist. Oh, don't worry, dear sister, Nightmare Moon said as she slipped from the night sky toward the forest. I'll make certain your little ponies learn just what a mistake they've made. Her body dissolved into a black mist. Spike looked at the leafy canopy and swallowed hard. He wasn't sure which was worse, the idea of Nightmare Moon watching him, or the total darkness of Everfree. Even though looking back, he could no longer see the edge of trees, as though the shadows had swallowed up his path to safety. He couldn't even tell how long he'd been walking for. Twilight shivered on his back, as Spike tried to focus on her. The familiar, reassuring weight of the dragon drew his attention away from the claw-like branches above. His horn shone a little brighter, green light pushing the shadows back a little more. Guess the others must have gotten further than we thought. Spike tried to lift the mood, voice barely breaking the silence. They're pretty fast, huh? They've got a good reason to be, Twilight answered, before suddenly jabbing a claw to the ground. Spike, look! The stallion was more than happy to look at something other than the eerie trees and shrubbery. His eyes hurried to the grassy trail, where he could see his light magic playing off and impressing the ground. He leaned closer, squinting to make it out. A hoof print! He realized, eyes following the direction seemed to go. Good eye, Twi! Spike smiled, seeing more tracks heading into the direction he was. The stallion broke into a trot, his eyes moving between watching where he went and the new trail. A chill breeze blew through his mane as curls of mist appeared between the trees. Spike, do you hear that? Twilight asked, cupping a claw by her ear fins. Spike slowed his hooves, listening carefully. A lone voice echoed in the distance. So quiet the unicorn couldn't be sure he was hearing anything. Maybe, he answered, the mist getting thicker around them. You think it's the others? I really hope so, Twilight responded, leaving a claw. Maybe you could turn up the light? They might see us. Spike concentrated, trying to brighten the glow around his horn. Magic poured through him, lightning extending outward. But the fog almost seemed to swallow up. Spike bit his lip as he looked around, the trees getting more and more difficult to see. I think this is as good as it gets, Spike informed his assistant, panting a bit from exertion. He moved a few more cautious steps. The voice sounded again, faint in distance, but familiar. Cheerily? Twilight shouted, causing Spike to jump in surprise. Cheerily, is that you? The voice almost sounded like it called out in response. A second voice called out, just as indecipherable as the first. Spike twisted in place, struggling to place where it was coming from. Something is really wrong here, he whispered. The fog was still growing thicker. Spike's light barely got past the hoof reach. He stumbled a few more steps, halting as a tree popped into view in front of him. He looked into the ground for tracks, but found only a blanket of white under his hooves. Still, the voices called out to him, warped and distant, but almost recognizable. Can't see a thing in all this, Spike complained, and snapping about to find some landmark. Wouldn't Ditsy or Thunderlane have cleared this if they came this way? The Everfree Forest is different. Remember, Spike? Twilight reminded him with this as he kept backing up. Weather works on its own. Yeah, but that doesn't oof! Spike was cut off as his rump collided with something. The branches of the tree he had run in swayed with impact. Claw-like twigs scratched across his rear. Spike yelped in surprise and pain, leaping away from the offending floor and hopping around in pain. Twilight's claws grew higher to avoid being thrown off by the sudden bucking. Are you okay? She asked as Spike finally stopped hopping around. I think so, he said, a scowl on his face. Ugh, this is worse than... Spike trailed off, jaw going slack. What, Spike? Twilight asked, leaving a hand in front of the stallion's face. What's it worse than? Spike shushed her and closed his eyes. His ears twisted a bit as the distant voices seemed to become more and more desperate. Underneath them, still hiding in the background noise, he could hear something. A soft chuckle. Something came back to him, wandering through a bank fog as cold as a playground, mocking laughter carrying around him. Spike's eyes snapped open with a sudden realization. The light around his horn shifted, and the mist suddenly began to pull away. It's worse than second grade! He realized. The light around his horn was blazing like a candle. Sit tight, Twi! I think I know what this is! Lights of green magic raced through the mist around him. Spike took a deep breath, pouring as much willpower into the spell as he could, as a blinding flash of green filled the area. The chuckle ceased. It was replaced by a scream. A pair of raging eyes flashing into view for the briefest moment. Spike lowered his head, panting for breath. The fog was thinning and fading away, some light spreading further and further. Dandelion! Dandelion! Ditsy's voice suddenly shouted into Spike's ear. Get any pony! The Pegasus stopped as he saw the purple stallion and dragon laying on the ground before them. Both of them had their ears, or ear fins in Twilight's case, covered and wincing in pain. Spike! Ditsy teared. Ouch! Spike groaned as the mare suddenly pulled him back to his hooves. Ditsy do? Thunderlane's voice sounded from above. The dark stallion floated down to a nearby tree branch, looking around in confusion. More and more of the fog burned away, and Spike could see Time Turner flicking a few drops of moisture from his tail. Cheerily and Big Mac both walked over from only a little further off the trail. What just happened? Cheerily asked, bumping her head with one hoof. I'm not entirely sure, Time Turner admitted with a shake of his head. Oh. Big Mac started to say something, but then closed his mouth. The farm pony simply pointed a hoof over to Spike and Twilight. Spike tried to smile as the 4.5 pairs of eyes locked on him. Only lazy-eyed Ditsy returned a grin.
You're here! Danger and Thunderlane, we thought you were going to find someplace safe to wait for us.
Ditsy spoke in a mild minute.
I told him you want to follow, and we should wait.
Spike was silently grateful as Thunderlane put a hoof over Ditsy's mouth. The feeling vanished as the weather pony gave him a look that seemed equal parts confusion and suspicion. Something wrong? Spike asked, trying not to seem nervous. Honestly, I just can't figure you out. First you call us all crazy, then you follow us anyway? Thunderlane pointed out, taking a few steps closer. Tighter I can get, but you're not even from Ponyville. Why the sudden change? Spike swallowed hard. He managed to squeeze out a dry, almost painful chuckle as he took a step away from Thunderlane. The memory of what happened at the hospital was all too fresh. Somehow, the answer seemed so simple earlier, sounded like ridiculous as he tried to bring it to his mouth. Well, I'm a reporter, remember? Spike answered, throwing out the first reasonable thing his mind came up with. 5 ponies versus Nightmare Moon? Can't let a story like this get passed by. Gyarados Thunderlane rolled his eyes and let out a disgusted sigh. The others all exchanged glances at the answer as well. Twilight's claw poked the unicorn in the ribs. Spike lowered his gaze in shame. Plus, you're the only ponies in town that don't hate me, he said, closing his eyes. I wanted to at least try and help. There was a silence for a moment, before a gentle wing fell across his back. Spike looked up to find Ditsy smiling at him, as she ushered him closer to the group. Thunderlane's gaze shot to the ground with a grimace.
Why not give him a chance, Thunderlane?
Charlie encouraged Pegasus Stallion.
It looks like he cleared that fog away after all.
Yeah, I don't get that either,
Thunderlane responded, raising an eyebrow.
Ditsy and I couldn't budget. How could a unicorn shift that stuff?
Maybe he's part Pegasus?
Ditsy guessed, one of her eyes stretching to Thunderlane.
I don't... What?
Thunderlane shook his head in disbelief.
It's because it wasn't fog, right, Spike?
Twilight suddenly spoke up, her eyes lighting with comprehension.
It was a spell, wasn't it?
You got it, Twilight,
Spike answered, a warm spark of pride growing in his chest.
The Wandering Mist. It's Trixie's old favorite.
Spike smiled and looked away from the dragon, only to find the others giving him a confused stares. Wandering Mist? Big Mac asked, apparently speaking for the rest of the group.
It's an illusion spell,
Twilight explained, shivering a bit.
A thick fog you can't see or hear anything in. Some point could be yelling right in your ear and you wouldn't notice.
Ditsy blushed a bit and scraped her hoof against the ground. I didn't think my sense of direction was that bad, Tighter muttered before clearing his throat. So, how is it you knew how to counter it?
Because it's literally full stuff,
Spike bragged, unable to resist polishing one hoof against his chest.
I dealt with schoolyard bullies in 2nd grade that used that one on me.
Yeah, but you never had to live with one, Twilight commented dryly, pinching Spike's ear again. Spike winced, but his boasting had already had an effect as a few smiles disappeared. Even as Thunderlane rolled his eyes, he seemed significantly less annoyed. Dissy's own face suddenly brightened up.
Oh my gosh! She gasped, wings flapping in excitement. If Spike could get rid of that dog, do you think he could hear Dinky and the others?
The sense of pride that Spike had been nurturing sputtered out. Dissy's expectant eyes both managed to focus on him. He lowered his eyes away from Ditsy and bit his lip.
I'm sorry. That illusion ender is the best spell I got.
Ditsy's face fell, and her wings seemed to flourish. Charlie patted her on the back and gave her both and Spike an encouraging smile.
Don't worry, Ditsy. There's still the elements of harmony,
she said, as the other mare nodded in response.
And thanks to Spike, we still have a chance of finding them.
Multimax and that spell of his kept us from wandering off the trail. Tighter chimed in with a smile. Best to get moving if every pony is ready.
The sooner the better, if you ask me,
Thunderlane agreed, taking the air with his wings.
I don't want to stick around that mist that comes back for round 2.
Tighter gestured down the trail, and the others began moving. Spike and Twilight exchanged a smile, and quickly fell into step with the group. Nightmare Moon was seething as her misty form weaved through the trees.
Foul stuff, he called it. A spell she herself has created, reduced to a child's plaything!
The very idea, combined with how easily he dispelled the mist, was enough to drive her even crazier. Celestia's silence wasn't helping matters. The other Alicorn was either just as stunned with the turn of events, or suppressing a laugh. Nightmare Moon assumed the latter.
Well, can't say I didn't try to be merciful first,
She growled, sensing the group of ponies took off once more.
From now on, I just need to be a little less subtle.
She darted off ahead, past the trees, breaking into the moonlight once more. A smile crossed her ethereal face as she found what they were walking toward. Spike's light shone as bright as he could hold it, illuminating the half-formed path up ahead. There was something about being with the group that made even the ever-free forest seem less threatening. A sensation that the others seemed to share now that they were clear of the fog. Dizzy was bobbing a bit in her flight path, a spark of hope in her eyes as she pressed ahead. Thunderlane just seemed focused on not crashing into her, as she hummed softly to herself. Charlie brought up the rear of the rest of the group alongside him. A slight spring to her step. Time Turner and Big Mac were leading the way, both of their strides confident and quick. The trees were quickly thinning around them, only adding to his feeling of ease. Spike looked up as he broke free of the tree line, finding himself under the full moon again. He quickly tumbled to a halt, as his gaze went back to ground level though. Charlie Spring stopped cold alongside him.
No offense, Time Turner,
Charlie spoke up, looking where they had been led to.
You sure this is the right way?
The teacher's apprehension was understandable. Not far past the trees was the edge of a cliff. Spike couldn't guess how far a drop it was, nor was he willing to get close enough to check. Thunderlane hovered over it, letting out a low whistle. One of the surveyors said he spotted something from this point, Titanic explained, walking closer to the edge. He said it looked like an old tower. Unfortunately, a fake storm started and we had to find cover before any pony could confirm.
So that might have been the castle?
Twilight guessed, as Spike took a few nervous steps closer. It's certainly best bet we have to go on, Titan pointed out, eyes squinting. Now, we just have to try and spot it. Let's see. Big Mac and Charlie quickly joined their fellow Earth pony at the edge. Spike sat a few hoof steps back, the light from his horn shining a bit brighter. Dizzy and Thunderlane still floated overhead, the stallion occasionally flying out over the drop a bit before circling back.
You see anything yet?
Twilight asked, standing on Spike's back, claws knit through his mane.
Yeah, a whole lot of trees,
Spike answered, turning the light up a little more.
Maybe something grew over the tower by now?
Spike noticed the dour glare Thunderlane was giving him, and quickly fell silent. Dizzy gasped and spun around midair.
Do you see it, Ditzy?
Thunderlane asked, flying closer to the mare.
No, not the tower,
Dizzy responded, shaking her head.
I thought I saw something else.
Something else?
Spike asked, deciding not liking the sound of those words.
This might be important, Miss Dew,
Nightera said. What sort of something was it?
I don't know,
Dizzy said with a shrug.
This kind of looks like a shadow.
Probably Spice Nightlight playing tricks with your eyes.
Thunderlane gasped before wincing.
No offense.
Spike clenched his jaw to keep from laughing. Dizzy seemed more confused than offended, but gave Thunderlane a pound in the head all the same. Big Mac suddenly circled his head up, a weird frown crossing his face as he poked the ground with one hoof.
Animals feel diet?
He asked, looking to the ground walkers.
Feel what?
Spike was cut off as he felt something shift from his rows. A hard rumbling filled the air. Twilight gasped as cracks began to appear in the ground beneath them. Some dark, swirling substance seeped through, pushing gaps further apart.
Run!
Titania's voice broke in over the sound of cliff crumbling. Big Mac was the first to act, snatching up Charlie's tail in his jaws. With a swing of his powerful neck muscles, the school teacher was sent sailing back toward the trees. She landed with a startled cry among some of the bushes, and well past the danger zone. Spike could feel the death grip Twilight had around his neck. He pushed himself as hard as he could, but felt like moving in slow motion, like a horrible nightmare he couldn't simply run from. The crack of stone separating from stone rent the air, and the whole world fell away.